for any species, you're going to need a rod and reel combo to start with. So, trout are species that tend to not grow as big as other species when you're fishing for them, so you're not going to need that heavy of an equipment. Anywhere from ultralight to medium rod will work, but I suggest that you go lighter, because if you have it too heavy, you're not going to get as good of a fight as if you already use a lighter setup. Now, for the line, you'll probably want somewhere between 8 or 10 pounds test for your main line. People have different preferences for the type of line, but just for me, monofilament works fine. And in some of these rigs, you're going to need to use a leader, and I tend to use 6-pound line for leader because it's harder for the fish to notice, and it's just also lighter, which is better for the fighting. Now, the first rig we're going to go over is the bobber rig. In this rig, you're going to need a hook, your line from your rod, you're going to need a bobber, and a few pieces of split shot. Begin with, you're going to need to tie your hook onto the main line using a clinch knot. Oftentimes, you use a worm on a bobber rig because worms tend to sink, so sometimes the bottom rigs may not be as effective because your bait's not going to be visible. That's why, in this case, we're going to use a bait holder hook. The bait holder hook has these little barbs on the shank to hold the bait in place. Next, we're going to put the split shot onto the line. The split shot is going to be at least a foot away from your hook, because if you put the split shot too close to your hook, the fish are going to notice it, and they probably won't bite. Simply put the opening in the split shot onto the line, rep some pliers, and pinch down. Now repeat with all your other split shots that you may use. As a reminder, the heavier the weight, generally, the farther you're able to cast. So, the larger water body you're fishing and the farther you need to cast, the more split shot I recommend you use. Now, finally, you're going to tie your bobber. In our case, we're just going to use a simple red and white bobber because these trout tend to bite pretty hard as compared to some other species, and they're actually quite easy to notice since many of them are a bigger size. So you're just going to need to open the hooks on the bobber, and then you can put that onto the line and it'll just fall in place, and then you be sure to keep that in place while opening the other hook and tying that onto the line. And it's fairly simple. It works both ways, and one trick I've found is if you're fishing with a partner or you're fishing with multiple rods, check your state regulations to see if you're allowed to do that. But what I found interesting is that you can tie your bobber with the red side facing up and have your friend tie their bobber with the white side hanging up. That way you can distinguish the difference between them. Now, our next rig is going to be a Carolina rig. This rig is more often used fishing the bottom, and I've I've had success using it mostly with power bait and power eggs. Now for your Carolina rig, you're going to need to first get your main line and get your sliding sinker and get a bead. First you put your sliding sinker through the line and then you put your bead after it. The point of the bead is to make sure that there's not excess vibration to the swivel and your line, and that just keeps things in good shape. Now, the reason why we have a sliding sinker is that when the fish pulls your bait, it's not going to feel as much weight because the sinker itself is stationary, but the line is free moving. The next step you want to do is tying a swivel to your main line. This can also be used by the knot of your choice, but I prefer using the clinch knot. Now there's another modified version of this rig in which you use a kettle sinker or a drop shot and you attach that to your swivel. Sometimes the swivels have these clips where you can just attach it to, and you get that swivel and just put it there. This one is, that type is more convenient because you can actually switch it out and use lighter rigs or use even heavier rigs if you wanted to. Now, the step after that is to tie your leader line onto your swivel. Now, your leader line is going to be anywhere from roughly a foot and a half to 2 feet and a half, and this is going to make your bait float above whatever is covering the bottom of the lake or river. So, once you've tied your leader line onto your swivel, you can tie your hook on. Now, since people mostly use power bait for this rig, we're gonna use a treble hook since the 3 hooks allow for the power bait to stick onto the hook better as opposed to 1 hook. However, if you are using power eggs, you just grab 1 or 2 power eggs, depending on the type of and the size of bait you want that day, and you just put a single egg holder hook on it, which is enough. Now, back to the power bait rig. For the Carolina, you're gonna need to put the power bait onto the hook, which we're not gonna do, but we're gonna show the power bait just for reference. And finally, I'd like to add something to this. It's something that I like to use. Most people don't use it, but frankly, what I've found easy to do is just getting a Carolina rig and just putting a bobber onto it to make a bobber rig that you can use to switch both between floating and sinking. I find this personally to be easy because that way it doesn't matter like where you're fishing, you don't need to change your rigs and you don't need to change your rods to fish 2 different methods, and I find it works efficiently, which is all that matters. Now, for this thing, you could change your bait and it would still work both ways, and you could also use the kettlebell sinker method, which then that you could switch out your sinker depending on the type of method of fishing you wanted to do. Now, from personal experience, I found that the cool part about this rig is that I can just fish for some bluegill using a bobber and no weight, And then, if I feel like I want to catch some bigger fish, I can just take off the bobber, and I'll be left with a Carolina rig, and then I can actually fish for catfish. And I've caught bluegill and catfish on the same trip and on the same type of rig using this method.